It's been about 8 months since I got my 2019 Mac Pro, which retails at a massive $15,000, and it's been doing a killer job editing videos in pure silence thanks to the excellent cooling system. But now that I've spent a few weeks with Apple's new 2025K iMac, it performs so well that I started wondering if I even need it anymore. In fact, we are building a new home and I need as much cash as possible, so if this $3,500 iMac can get close to the performance of my Mac Pro for the tasks that I do daily, then I'm definitely gonna sell it and pocket about 10 grand, which will be perfect for a nice home theater setup. We'll be looking at a wide variety of uses such as Logic Pro, Xcode, photo editing with Photoshop and Lightroom, video editing, gaming, and much more. I'll tell you up front that these tests were really eye-opening, both in favor of the Mac Pro and against it, and revealed a few things that I've never known before, which are going to change the way that I'll recommend computers forever. And that's not clickbait. And I also highly recommend buying an Ultrasoft Premium Max Tech shirt, or with that, one of these soft, comfortable masks if you want to support the channel and have something that's super comfortable. First, here are the full specs of each Mac. The Mac Pro has 2 extra cores, but they are an older design and run slower than the new iMacs, but will present a few surprises. My Mac Pro has the Vega 2 graphics with 32GB of video memory compared to the 5700 XT with 16GB in the iMac. You can also get a W5700X in the Mac Pro for a fair bit less than my Vega 2, and it's a newer design but has less raw power and half of the memory that also runs quite a bit slower. We also have a huge difference in RAM, 64GB compared to 192, which I'll show you why it really doesn't matter. Now lastly, my Mac Pro has the $2,000 Afterburner card, which accelerates ProRes and ProRes RAW. The Mac Pro comes in at about 15 grand, but I bought the RAM myself, bringing it down to 13,000, which is still almost 4 times the cost of the iMac, which was 3540 if you buy the RAM yourself and follow our RAM install guide, which you absolutely should do. I'll link it down below. Along with that, the 5K iMac comes with a gorgeous 5K display that costs $1,300 to add to the Mac Pro. Now there's more to the story, such as ports, cooling, upgradability, and more, but let's save that for later and jump right into performance. Starting off with the good old Geekbench that tests a wide variety of tasks, the iMac win in single core due to its faster frequency, but in multi-core, the Pro scores closer to 30% higher. Now putting a constant 100% CPU load on all of the cores in Cinebench R20, which is a 3D rendering benchmark, the i9 iMac shockingly beats out the Mac Pro by just over 100 points, even though it does have 2 less cores. Looking deeper, the results actually make sense because the Mac Pro runs at 3.6 GHz under full load, and the iMac runs at 4 GHz, which is overall faster, and it actually uses about 150 watts to achieve the faster speed instead of 170 watts, so it's more efficient. But with that, it also runs much hotter and louder because of the small chassis instead of being completely silent. As for graphics, Geekbench's metal graphics test resulted in the Mac Pro scoring just over 65% higher in raw graphics performance, which is a big difference, as it should be for a graphics card that costs almost as much as the whole iMac. But hold on, because real-world performance will be interesting. Looking at another graphics test, this time gaming with Unigine Heaven, here instead of a 65% difference, the Mac Pro's Vega 2 is only 18% faster, which is a huge difference compared to before. That's because the latest AMD RDNA graphics have lots of improvements outside of raw graphics power. They're great for gaming and a few other things, as you'll notice. The Mac Pro is the fastest Mac for gaming. It can even handle 6K gaming, but the 5K iMac is almost as good while being a fraction of the price. Graphics are also great for 3D rendering, which we used Blender to test here, and the difference was even smaller at about 7%, only being about 1 minute faster to render the BMW and classroom scenes, which is very interesting. Let's get into some more common uses like photo editing. Using Lightroom, both are extremely smooth and fast while editing. To be honest, I couldn't notice any difference. I exported 542 megapixel edited raw images, which maxes out the CPU, so I expected the results to be close, but what I saw was shocking. The Mac Pro was practically twice as fast. These results made no sense since Cinebench was actually faster on the iMac, so I searched through everything to find a bottleneck, and surprisingly it wasn't the RAM, it wasn't the SSD, and after hours of testing and researching, I figured out that the reason the Mac Pro is so much faster is its 6-channel memory instead of dual channel. The base iMac Pro is slower in every way than the 5K iMac, and it has half the RAM, yet it was actually somewhat in between the Mac Pro and the iMac in terms of performance, and that uses 4-channel memory, which is also right there in the middle. Onto Photoshop, once again, I couldn't tell a single difference when doing my normal work, but we ran the Geekbench Photoshop mix benchmark, and the Mac Pro smoked the 5K iMac. I'm betting it's once again because of the 6-channel memory instead of dual channel. With that said, they trade blows in certain tasks, so pause this video to see the detailed breakdowns. Before some shockers in Logic Pro and Xcode, let's touch on something that we do on the daily, and that's video editing. I'll be doing a detailed review including Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve tests in a dedicated video on my filmmaking channel, which I'll link down below, but here I will focus on Final Cut. There's certain things that this 5700 is just so much faster at. The same thing goes for stabilizing 4K HEVC footage, where the iMac was 65% faster. I exported 2 5-minute sample projects with multiple effects, the first being common 4K H.264 and the second being H.265, and in both cases the Mac Pro was faster. I then exported one of our YouTube videos, which is roughly 12 minutes long, and it has a ton of graphs and effects, and the gap actually closed up here when your GPU has to do all of these effects and animations. The newer 5700 is just more efficient. By the way, all of these numbers are using the latest version of Final Cut, which has changed some of the results from our previous videos. Getting into tougher tests like Canon RAW, the Mac Pro is still super fast for this, taking just 5 minutes, but the iMac isn't too far behind. As for editing smoothness, the Mac Pro can handle 4K 60 RAW with effects perfectly, with some more overhead for extra effects, where the iMac can barely handle 4K 60 with the LUT at full resolution, but that is still enough for most C200 editors who usually work in a 24 or 30 FPS timeline. Moving on to Red RAW, using the new metal decoding, the Mac Pro can play back this really compressed 8K almost perfectly in an 8K timeline, while the iMac is just a few frames per second behind, and both are limited by graphics, not the processors. Rendering the projects, I was shocked to see that the Mac Pro was actually slower at exporting my 4.5K Red RAW test by just a few seconds, and for the 8K project exporting out to 4K, the iMac was actually 22% faster, which is crazy. Now, if you had the cheaper W5700X in your Mac Pro, it would match up to the iMac here, but would be slightly less smooth when you're actually doing editing compared to the Vega. The new Canon R5 and R6 are very popular, but their 422 footage is tough to edit, so many people are going to be transcoding. Now, the Mac Pro can convert 30 minutes of 4K 10-bit in about 30 minutes, while the iMac takes 37. Surprisingly, when editing in the timeline, the iMac is actually smoother. With that, exporting a 5-minute project is actually more than a minute faster using the iMac compared to the Mac Pro. It's another thing that I didn't expect, and that's because the CPU can run faster at up to 5 GHz. Now, my Mac Pro does have something that the iMac will never get, and that is the $2,000 Afterburner card that decodes ProRes and ProRes RAW, so the CPU doesn't have to do it. It's important to note that it won't help transcoding since it can't encode ProRes, but in cases when you're going from one flavor of ProRes to another, like this 4K ProRes RAW project, there is a noticeable speed difference since the CPU can focus solely on encoding. The results are similar, testing 8K ProRes RAW to 8K ProRes, where the Afterburner equipped Pro is significantly faster. But if you don't dish out $2,000 for this extra card, the 10-core iMac is just as fast as the 12-core Mac Pro. As far as playback, the iMac can handle one stream of 8K ProRes RAW in an 8K project perfectly smooth, exactly like the Mac Pro without Afterburner, but neither can do more than that. With the Afterburner, my Mac Pro can do 4 streams of 8K, or a single stream of 16K ProRes RAW, which is something that this iMac will never do. So if you'll need to have an afterburner or the ability to say buy a 28 core or have 4 graphics card, you'll only be able to do that in a Mac Pro. Overall, for the vast majority of people, the 5K iMac with the 5700 XT is rounding up to be an amazing bargain for video editing. In some cases, it's actually faster than my Mac Pro, and when it's slower, the difference isn't dramatic. Now, what about Logic Pro X and also Xcode? Well, the results are going to surprise you. The iMac could handle 125 tracks before shutting down in our Logic benchmark, which is really respectable and enough for most people, and I expected the Mac Pro to be similar, but it handled up to 227 tracks, once again probably because of memory bandwidth. The results were similar in our custom Xcode benchmark, where the Mac Pro was almost twice as fast, even though the test maxes out the CPU on both. Now, unlike Logic though, the iMac Pro was slower than the iMac for Xcode, so I can't say it's a memory bandwidth limitation, but the Mac Pro sure is fast for compiling code. Overall, as far as performance, this i9 5700 XT iMac is more than enough for most people, even most professionals, and it's much faster than just a few years ago. Massive difference. With that said, the Mac Pro does excel if you're pushing it to the absolute extremes and beyond, and for compiling code and exporting photos, it is much quicker. And for some of the people out there that might be doing a ton of that constantly on the daily, it might be worth spending 3 to 5 times as much depending on the configuration and your monitor's price. Along with that, the Mac Pro is almost dead silent, where the iMac will sound like a hairdryer in many of these rendering tests, which does get annoying. But if most of your time is spent editing photos and editing the video and not constantly rendering it, then it stays mostly quiet. The Mac Pro also has 8 Thunderbolt ports, up to 12 actually, depending on your graphics, instead of having 2, and it has dual 10 gigabit Ethernet instead of one 10 gig Ethernet. And of course, it's expandable in the future, so if you're gonna keep your machine for many years, that is a definite plus. On the flip side, iMacs hold their value so well that it might actually be cheaper to upgrade every few years to the latest and greatest, instead of holding on to a Mac Pro for say 10 years, where the value will go from $15,000 down to just a few. I just sold my 2017 iMac and it cost me $1,200 to own it for 3 years, so you could do the math yourself there. After all of that testing, the iMac does indeed get very close to the Mac Pro in the daily professional tasks that I do, and it is actually faster for editing my Canon R5 footage. So with that said, the Mac Pro is going to be put up for sale. So if you're interested in getting a great deal on a Mac Pro, let me know down in the comments section below. If you guys want to see the full final review of the 2020 5K iMac, make sure you guys click that subscribe button up above and check out one of these ultra premium soft shirts down below in the merch shelf. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next video.